Indonesia, a name known around the world. But what if I told you it didn't come from Indonesian at all? In fact, it was invented by Europeans and only later transformed into the identity of an entire nation. Here is the unbelievable story. Today, the name Indonesia instantly brings to mind the world's largest archipelago, a nation of more than 17,000 islands, hundreds of ethnic groups, and one shared identity. But the story of the name Indonesia is far older than the modern country itself. It began thousands of years ago, traveled through ancient Greek geography, European scholarship, colonial politics, and finally becomes the banner of a national revolution. This is the full story of the name Indonesia. Long before the word Indonesia exists, ancient civilizations already knew that somewhere far east of India, there were mysterious islands filled with spices, gold, and exotic cultures. Greek and Roman writers who had never been there simply called everything beyond India as the Indies. To them, the islands around Southeast Asia were the Eastern Indies. This is a fact, distant word on the edge of the map. For centuries, this name would stick. When European explorers arrived in the 1500s, they too used phrases like East Indies, Malay Archipelago, and later Dutch East Indies. But none of this represented a united identity. There was no Indonesia yet, just scattered kingdoms and colonial territories. Do you know what is the most shocking fact about Indonesian history? The modern word Indonesia actually wasn't created by Indonesians. Why did it happen? It began as an idea in the minds of European scholars studying the people and islands of Southeast Asia in the 19th century. The first spark came in 1847 from an English ethnologist named George Samuel Windsor Earl. In a scientific journal about the Indian archipelago, he proposed two names, Indonesians and Malayunesians. He mentioned Indonesia but did not prefer it. He thought Malayunesians was more accurate, but his student disagreed. 2 years later, in 1849, a Scottish scholar named James Richardson Logan used the word Indonesia consistently in his writings. To Logan, Indonesia was the perfect name for the vast chain of islands stretching from Sumatra to Papua, a single geographic unit. This was the first true birth of the word Indonesia. In the late 1800s, the name spread through academic circles. A major figure was the German anthropologist Adolf Bastian. He published a huge multi-volume work titled Indonesian origin in des Malaysian Archipels, Indonesia or the islands of the Malay archipelago. Bastian's influence was enormous. Soon in universities across Europe, scholars and scientists referred to the region as Indonesia. But still, the people who lived there did not. And everything changed in the early 20th century. As nationalisms began to rise across Asia, a new generation of educated Indonesians started studying abroad, especially in the Netherlands. These young thinkers were searching for a name that could unite Javanese, Sundanese, Balinese, Batak, Minangkabau, Bugis, Dayak, and hundreds of other groups into one identity. They needed a word that belonged to everyone, not one ethnicity. In 1925, the student association Indonesia made a bold move. They renamed themselves Perhimpunan Indonesia or the Indonesian Association. This was the first political use of the name by Indonesians themselves, and it spread like wildfire. The defining moment came in 1928 at the historic Sumpah Pemuda or the Youth Pledge. Young leaders from across the archipelago stood together and declared 3 points. One motherland, Indonesia. One nation, the Indonesian nation. And one language, Indonesian. For the first time, the diverse peoples of the archipelago saw themselves as one nation with one name. Indonesia was no longer just a geographic term, it was a dream, a shared identity. World War II accelerated history. Japan defeated and expelled the Dutch in 1942, effectively ending the era of the Dutch East Indies. For 3 years, young Indonesian nationalists found new opportunities to organize, to speak, and to plan the creation of a new nation. When Japan surrendered in 1945, that moment finally arrived. On 17 August 1945, Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta proclaimed the independence of Republik Indonesia. The name that began as a scholarly term that became a political identity was now the name of a sovereign nation. Why did Indonesia become the final lasting name? Because it was inclusive. It belonged to no single tribe, no single island, no single religion. It represented unity in diversity, a concept later captured in the motto Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. It was already recognized worldwide, and most importantly, it became the symbol of a long struggle for freedom. Today, the name Indonesia stands as one of the most powerful nation identities in the world. A reminder that even a word created in a distant land can be transformed into the heartbeat of a nation. And that's it, the full story of how the name Indonesia was born, from ancient geography to European scholarship to the spirit of a people united in their fight for independence. If you enjoy this deep dive into history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore more stories from the past. Thanks for watching.